All right, so I'd love to provide a bit of context around the journey that I've had with these wonderful people to this point. So working in the team that I work in at Schoolbox, being professional services manager, I engage with schools often when they are embarking on a journey with Schoolbox. So they have their vision, they have their strategy, and then we look at how to roll that out throughout the Schoolbox implementation. So Aisha, when I met you before you started your Schoolbox implementation and you took on that big journey, you know, you had such a clear vision for the school's digital systems. And it was very, very comprehensive. Your intention to use almost every element of the platform, right down to rubric capabilities and indicators, and having that consistency across all of your year levels was truly impressive. And so I think that's something that I found quite inspiring in the way you operate. Lee, Dubai British School, Jumeirah, we met first over in Dubai when there was no school yet. So Lee had a vision for what he wanted his school to be like. The vision was very clearly focused on connectedness and a sense of community. I'd like to point out that Lee and that the school are using our portal solution and using that as an insight into the classroom and what's going on from a pedagogical point of view in the classroom through that communication tool. So it's been really interesting to see your strategy evolve as you've implemented and see it come to life as well as the school opened and what your vision fully translated into that physical environment. Chris, as our Chief Commercial Officer and also former Head of School in Australia and international schools in Hong Kong as well. Chris leads multiple departments at Schoolbox. Some of the teams that he leads engage with school leaders at really pivotal strategic moments. So when they're considering partnering with Schoolbox in the first place, and then also at a point of ongoing engagement where there's potential shifts in direction or change management, and you know, change management can influence the way Schoolbox is being used. Also, given his experience in schools, he's very well versed in school leadership and strategy execution. So given that we have two panellists who have recently implemented, Chris, I'm hoping that you can help provide insight from that sort of long-term Schoolbox perspective as well around what change looks like. So let's dive into our first question. Just before we do that, a little bit of context, some common challenges that we have in schools. This is where schools can sometimes become a little bit stuck. Sometimes, you know, vision is not equal to execution. Strategy can be documented but not embedded in daily tools. And we have the tool fatigue, sometimes some patchy adoption going on and inconsistent use and misaligned priorities. So this is the reality of the problem set. All right, so let's start at the beginning. So we are looking at vision to action here. Aisha, I might start with you if I can. So where did this all begin for you? Like your big vision that you had for change and your different systems, how did it all start?
So I was teaching overseas and I came back to Melbourne in the middle of 2023 and started my position at Cadena International. When I got there, one of the things I heard all the time, we've got so many systems in our school. We never know where to find anything. I was given a 24-hour challenge to find my payslip. I failed miserably. The person in my role before me was taking us on a Microsoft LMS journey. And when we looked at that and spoke with Microsoft currently is not a learning management system. So we then started the journey of what learning management system do we need to put into our school? But more importantly, we didn't have an intranet, which is why you could never find anything. We were using Synergetic, and for those people that are Synergetic in this school, I can see you sort of ticking. Nobody likes Synergetic. And so we created a consultative group, and it took us around about 6 months from start to finish to go through the process that was really authentic, where anyone in the school could come forward and be part of this journey of selecting our new system. If you get it right, the system that you get should be a 10 to 12 and hopefully in Schoolbox's case 30-year change. But usually you don't want to do it and undo it. So we needed to get this right. We took the staff that volunteered to be part of the consultative committee on a journey. We had elected 4 different tools. And of the 4, the first group had to get it down to 2. And the final 2, which was Schoolbox and Toddle, were given a very extensive rubric about all the needs in our school, from rubrics to pastoral to understanding what the curriculum planning, the gap analysis, all of these things. Chris McDonald, who's amazing, and if you've had any contact with him through your process, I'm sure you'll agree, came out, as did a rep from Toddle. And what we quickly realised is that one-stop shop that we wanted, Toddle couldn't give us, and Schoolbox could. And so that began the journey of, let's become a Schoolbox school. It was overwhelmingly Schoolbox the voting. We then flip forward to 24, and we have to start to hook in our systems and figure out how it aligns. It's part of our strategic plan. So systems and structures and alignments and systems working in conjunction with our teachers and our parents and our students in an effective way is part of our strategic plan. So we had to figure out our timeline, what we were going to put in when. And for us, because putting a new LMS and putting Schoolbox in was like buying a fixer-upper. We pulled the lid off our systems and realised, oh my gosh, there's so many things that needed fixing. Even something as silly as rubrics, right? Like we've all got rubrics in our school. We didn't have rubric alignment. We didn't have agreement around what direction the rubrics went. We didn't have agreement about how many columns or how many rows, let alone what the curriculum was actually saying and the rows were comprised of. So we realised that very quickly that the rubrics wouldn't happen until the second part of the year, and that we would start to focus on putting pastoral in. So in term 3 last year, we put in the pastoral module, which is fantastic. In term 4, we all had to, one rubric was the expectation, and then in 25, we've been all in. We've just launched our IntelliSchools data dashboards. If you're not familiar with that, go and speak to the team at IntelliSchools. It's amazing. It brings all of your pieces of the puzzle in Schoolbox together in beautiful analytic dashboards. But for us, that was our strategy, and it was always aligned with what do our staff need, what do our students need, what do our parents need. And we've still got lots of exciting things that we're planning to do, but at the moment we're in a really happy place where we're feeling like that we've done a lot of those things we'd set out to do when we met you all.
Can I jump in? Other than hiring Aisha for my sales team, because she's doing a great job, what I wanted to really point out, I think the part you really, I want to just elaborate a little bit more on. You talked about bringing staff on board and connecting the dots, and I think from a pedagogical vision perspective, it's really important to make sure that we've got alignment across our school in this area. I was fortunate to go to Cardinia in the final presentation that we did with the school, and I think one of the things that really stood out to me was that there wasn't 2 people sitting in the room. There was a team of 15, 20 people sitting in the room from all areas of the school. And from a pedagogical vision perspective, for what the school was trying to achieve, it was really clear that there was alignment across the board of every single person in that room. And I think if I reflect on the Schoolbox journey, when I joined Schoolbox 3.5 years ago, one of the first things that the business said to me was that we've got great connections with IT teams and really good with IT directors who are doing an amazing job. But one of the things we don't have is cut through to senior leaders within the school. And senior leaders that start a journey, and I think in this case, the senior leaders were all in, and they stayed all in at every step. They didn't step out or hand it over to the technology teams to then try to support the school. They kept in the process the whole way through, and I think that's something that you did really well from setting that vision right from the word go.
So, Lee, you would have had a very vastly different experience there in terms of where this all kicked off from and establishing your vision. So, can you talk us through a little bit of what that looked like?
Yeah, we didn't have 15 people around the table. When I started with Dubai British School Jumeirah, I actually started in the January, and the school didn't open until the August. So when I arrived in the January, I had a really, quite an abrupt entry into the job, because we were in our what is our central office, which is not filled with educators. It's finance people, it's HR people, it's IT managers, things like that. So when myself and the head of primary, Mary, sat down in there and started getting really excited talking about education things, we got eye rolls and we got tuts, and we even got a couple of people stand up and move away to go and work somewhere away from us. So we very quickly took ourselves out of central office and started working out of coffee shops. And that's really where our vision came. It was two educators sat around a table talking about what had been sold to us when we were hired into the company to set up Dubai British School Jumeirah. And one of the first conversations I had with the Chief Operating Officer of Talim was that he talked about a community school. And if any of you have ever worked in international schools, that's quite difficult to get because you've got quite a transient population of families, transient nature of the staffing. But that was kind of one of our main missions for the school, and it's become one of our 4 pillars that we have now that drives everything behind our school, and that is that our community matters to us. So if you come, your schools may be similar, you go to a school and to get in as a parent you have to sign a document and you have to do this and maybe have your photo taken, pass over some ID or whatever it might be. We wanted to kind of get rid of all of that physically. If you come into our school, the entrance of our school looks a little bit like an Apple store. It's really beautiful. It's a wonderful space, but without people, it's a little bit lacking. So we made our entire entrance of our school open. Our parents work there remotely on every day, so they actually use Schoolbox to book little booths to work out of as a resource booking. Our parents use that, and we wanted to replicate that in the digital world for the parents that work, that can't get into the school, the parents that don't get to come and attend all the parent information evenings. But traditionally in Dubai, it's probably the tip of the spear when it comes to the free market of education. So it's all about what you can show and what you can show off about, and it has all sorts of negative implications on the way that education systems run, like the way students are put into certain courses and all that sort of stuff, which I can speak to a whole different platform. But what we wanted to do was wanted to be a little bit different with that and make parents feel welcome into our school. We wanted them to get that real sense of being part of something, and really, having worked with Schoolbox before, it made so much sense for us to bring that in and that to be that the gateway, the window into our school. I thought I was very fortunate that I wasn't dealing with change management, and naively I went into this saying, well, we haven't got to do any change management. We're a brand new school, this is how we operate, we just bring teachers in and it'll just be great. But of course there is change management because teachers have worked somewhere else and they come in and say, well, I had this platform at my former school, and we had parents that came in and said things, well, we had this platform, and that there was change management, and that kind of caught us a little bit. We weren't really ready for that. But yeah, from the vision to action, it was 2 people sat around a coffee table chatting about the way we wanted our school to look. And then I was very fortunate. I've got a wonderful marketing manager that you will all know, Avashi. She's got a wonderful eye for aesthetics, so I would very often put things together and put it in front of her. And very slowly, she became more and more comfortable telling me that my work was rubbish and she needed to get hold of it and clean it up. But she's taken real ownership over that. And I think that, for me, is the number one lesson that I've learned about developing, I guess, any approach, but with Schoolbox in particular, was about developing ownership within people. And I think we kept our strategic vision quite broad. I don't think it's my job to tell people how to enact the vision. We kept it really broad, and it was around the idea that our community is important to us. We want really high quality communication going out to them. And then it's the action of it then has just been people taking ownership of different areas. So the aesthetics of our instance is wonderful because we've got our marketing manager really sees that as her job to keep that looking nice. I've now got a wonderful young lady that works in reception that has been eager to get more involved in the development of Schoolbox. Dalili is the name of our instance. So she is now taking more ownership of little sections of that. And we've really done a lot of work with our teachers understanding what it means to put out a really high quality news post, and making sure that that's developed in a way that is, you're really careful with your audiencing, with the time that the news post goes out, how long it's going to be on there for, all those sorts of things. So it's just about, for me, was setting a really broad vision and then developing ownership with individuals within the school. And so far it's gone okay, but we will continue to evolve as the school grows.
I think you've undersold yourself a little bit, if I'm completely honest. I think one of the things that it was really clear from my perspective that set Lee apart from a school principal position was just the clarity in the why. Why are we doing this? What is our purpose? And I think it's really clear when not just working with Schoolbox, but listening to Lee speak over a couple of conferences now, him setting that purpose and that why really clearly to enable those people around him to action what that vision was really important. And I think I can't reiterate enough the importance of having that real clear clarity into why you're using it, whether it's Schoolbox or any other platform. The why is so important. And as I said, that was something that really set out clearly from the start, being a brand new school. So as I said, I thought you did a wonderful job in that space.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Let's jump to our next question now. So, this feeds throughout all of our questions, really, the concept of leadership, the vision and enacting all of that, but all, hinges on leadership. And also culture within the school. And we can already get a sense of what the culture has been like in these schools and continues to be like in these schools, obviously, from the answers that we're hearing here. So, Lee, maybe let's start with you again here. What about the culture piece? So I know you've touched on this a little bit already, but you had to shape the culture from the ground up. And what role did leadership play in making it stick?
I came from I won't name the school here, but I came from a different school in Southeast Asia when I moved to DBSJ, and I loved that school. I was in floods of tears when I left, all that sort of stuff. I'd only been there a short period of time. But there were some things that I took from that school that really bothered me, and I wanted to make sure that, a little bit like with parenting, I don't try to make my daughter something that I want her to be. I just try to avoid letting her be the things that I don't like when I see other children. And it was the same with the school. There were things that had bothered me about my previous school, particularly around culture, that was problematic for me. So again, Mary and I sat when we were thinking about recruitment, which started straight away for us, and we wrote almost like a manifesto for our recruitment, and it became something that, it's not groundbreaking, but when we sent that out to people prior to interview, it was basically saying, this is what we're looking for. If you're not that person, don't come to your interview, just tell us and we'll cancel the interview. And it worked around things, if you've read Hastings' book, No Rules Rules, around Netflix. There were a few things from that we pulled out. And that talks about talent density. It talks about when Netflix went through a difficult time, they reduced their staffing down and found that they became more efficient because they'd kept all of their real high talent people. We also I read the book Legacy around the All Blacks and the no dickheads rule and things like that. So all of those things came through in this manifesto. It was one side of A4, and then on the back of that A4 there were some belief statements that we made with commitments as a school that we've made that have now evolved further, and they've become our professional commitments that now feed through our appraisal system and everything. And none of it is performative. So it's not about how are you going to get the best grades out of your kids, how are you going to ensure that you're proving to us that it's this, this and this. It's four fairly simple statements, and one is that all children can succeed. Our community matters to us. It's a little bit more wordy when you look into it, but the cornerstones of it is all students can succeed, our community matters to us, education is ever-changing and complex, and the final one is the no dickheads. It's just be a great person, be professional, address things face to face, and they were our four kind of pillars that we went around developing our culture. And we asked questions all about that. Because if someone comes in and they're less effective in a classroom, I've got great leaders that can go in and coach them through that and help them to develop. There's all sorts of books and things that you can read, but if someone that hasn't got the right character for our school, and it could be that they fit somewhere else, but they just don't fit for us, then it all falls down. So when you're talking about everyone being behind that vision, it starts even at recruitment. I remember vividly, we sat in London interviewing a guy that was showing off about the fact that he'd worked at 10 Downing Street and he'd been involved in politics and he'd done all this and he was going to be this wonderful English teacher for us. I just didn't like him. And I didn't think other people were going to like working with him. And we ended up hiring someone that didn't have the glowing CV that he had, but when we sat down, we laughed and we joked and we learnt about her family, and she told us about the difficulties that she was having about thinking about moving to Dubai. That's someone that I want to work with, and that's someone that I would enjoy spending time with. And the proof in the pudding was grabbing a coffee around March time of last school year, and someone came to me and said, we're really nervous. And I said, who's we? And they said, the first year teachers, we're all really nervous. And I said, what about? They said, whether the second wave of teachers that are going to come in are going to be as good as what we've experienced this year, because we all really love working here. We all get on. There's nobody here that we really feel that we don't vibe with. And they were basically saying, we want to make sure it's not a fluke. Are you good enough to do it again? Like, we think you might have looked out a little bit in that first year. But again, so far, things seem quite good this year, and we've brought good people in again. But I think it's a mindset shift that you have to make. And I don't think there's anything innovative or radical about what we do. But within my company, we're part of quite a large group. I'm seen as a radical. And it's because I hire people that I like rather than people that come with these flashy CVs. But I think a culture in a school is so much more important than the performance piece. And that's not to say that we are actually the opposite. I've often said to people, we're not a family. This comes out of Reed Hastings' book. We're not a family, because if you're a family, you tolerate the racist uncle or the alcoholic auntie. We don't tolerate underperformance. We don't tolerate people not being the standard that we want. We're more like a high-performing sports team, because you all understand the direction you're going in, you all understand your part in that role, and you're not treading on each other's toes. You're all trying to do your bit to get us to where we want to be. And I think that really fed through when we started looking at Schoolbox. People did find it difficult. There were some things that they had to overcome that they didn't like about the system or whatever it was, but I think they understood the bigger picture and where they played in that. So that was the big thing for me, I think. Culture starts at retention and recruitment.
I think really interesting, just you talking then about everybody being on the same page. I came back from international education, similar stories to Lee, but when I came back I joined a school, and I don't think there's anyone in the room from the school that I joined, and I don't think they'd mind me talking about it, but it was a Schoolbox school, and it was the first experience that I'd had with a Schoolbox as the product. And what was really eye-opening was the school had an amazing culture. The people were just unbelievable to work with. Everybody was there for the right reasons, and for the vision of the school was to provide every child with the greatest opportunity that we can possibly give them. But one of the things with the digital platform that when I walked in was, and I didn't know this until I left 12 months later, was that everyone was working in silos with the digital platform, and there was very little connection as to what we were doing and how we were doing it. And I think the purpose piece, so the secondary school was doing something, the junior school was doing something. I spent a lot of time as the head of primary looking at how do I review the curriculum? How do I make sure that it's documented correctly? At this point of time, I didn't know what I didn't know with Schoolbox. And I remember leaving, and the first thing I did was I joined Schoolbox, and a week later I rang the deputy principal and I said, Julia, we don't know what we don't know. And as a new leader coming into that school and the digital platform, I just accepted it as a digital platform that the school was using. But what really resonated with me when I left was that how important it is for leadership to actually understand what's being used and how it's being used and why it's being used. And I think that was the thing that I found was those siloed approaches meant that there was inconsistent experiences for parents, meant that students were getting inconsistent experiences when they went from classroom to classroom, and that teachers weren't aligned in what they were saying. So we often, when I spoke to her again, it was, and I talk to a lot of schools about this now, I've moved into this role, where does technology sit with your policy and practices to enable it to be aligned, to enable your staff to be the best that they possibly can be? Quite often we talk to people about assessment workflows in Schoolbox, and we say, tell us about your assessment workflows. Okay, great, you use this weighting scale and you use this method. Is that in your assessment policy? And the amount of times we get the answer of, no, it hasn't been aligned, is quite extraordinary. Yet a really key piece, we expect our teachers to adhere to the policies and practices that we want as a school, but we're misaligning what that technology piece looks like. So from a cultural shift, that was the biggest focus for the school, and I'm really pleased to say that they've made huge shifts in that space, and what they do with Schoolbox now is quite extraordinary in there. But it was once the right people engaged, took ownership, and helped support the rest of the people in the school to actually do the best they can from a cultural perspective.
So our school is almost the polar opposite of Lee's school. We have staff that have been in our school a really long time, Our new staff that are coming in is because our school's grown quickly over the years, but we do have a lot of, I term them lifers, that have been through many iterations of different things that have happened in our school. Our culture, so innovation, technological advancement innovation is our cornerstone, and innovation and technology is woven through our strategic plan. How is that translating into our culture? Our culture's interesting. Because we have people in our school that have been there a long time, change is hard. Really, really hard. And it's a lot of change. One of the things that we did, because it is an absolutely strategic decision, who do we need in these spaces to lead the change? Who is going to be effective? Who are our teacher champions? And they were very deliberate decisions. So people like it, our junior school culture is really different to our senior school culture. And I don't say that in a way that's good or bad, it just is. But who do we need in the junior school driving the change? Who do we need in our senior school driving the change? Who do we need whole school driving the change? Our heads of department, really empowering them. Our old system was designed to learn. If you wanted something changed in that system, something as simple as a rubric, you had to email one person in our school and wait for that person to fix it. So the fact that in Schoolbox, they have the flexibility to make these changes at a department level when they're talking about things is huge. But putting those rubrics in was a lot of work. And it impacted the culture. So how do we manage that culture? How do we root what we do in the why? Who does it benefit? Now we're starting to get through, I think, the first big 6 months of that change. People are getting more comfortable with the system. You must invest in people's time with learning the new system, whether that's providing, we have coaches in our junior school and our senior school, so I do the junior school coaching, and we have 2 senior school coaches. Now that is one-to-one, that is department, that is meeting time. Make sure that you invest in helping them learn the new system and giving them time, because it takes them much longer to do things. What they could do in D2L marking a rubric that was 10 years old because it hadn't been updated because you had to wait for that one person to do it, they can now do quickly, but they have to build them. So give them the time to make sure that they learn the system and that you are valuing that this is hard. Communication was another big one. You have to communicate with your people. Let them know. They love a timeline. Our staff love a timeline. They like to know where it's headed. And if you don't tell them what's coming, it puts them in a place of uncertainty. And that's when you get the, there's so much change and everything's moving. But if you can connect it, so every time I run a staff meeting, the strategic plan is there. The outcome in the strategic plan. The timeline is there. This is where we are in the journey. Communication is sent before and after. They can book coaches. They have meeting time. So I feel like that has helped us with our change management. It hasn't been easy. There's been times in the change that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But it is so worth it when you get to this point where things are starting to move, and the beneficiaries of this work will be our students.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think being very clear with your vision and what you want from your school culture and communicating that with your staff and bringing them on the journey, that's crucial. If you want that buy-in, it's really important to sort of keep that moving forward. Something that Chris and I have been speaking about recently is the concept of, in an implementation, you can pull together a working group that supports you through all of your different implementation stages. But then what? And I love that you've made that point that you have people who are committed to continually working in the space and supporting the upskilling of staff moving forward. So I almost want to pose this question to the panel, but then also to the broader room as well. In your schools, do you have a Schoolbox working group? Or do you have more than 1 or 2 people that are committed to considering how you can keep the alignment there between your Schoolbox instance and what you're doing at a school from a cultural perspective and pedagogical perspective? Can we have a show of hands if you have sort of a bit of a working party that continues to keep across things? Yeah, that's great. That's really, really interesting. Because one of the pieces that we see with schools, and Chris, maybe throw to you here in terms of the engagement piece with schools that have been with us for some time. The features, the product, it evolves, and schools evolve as well, and policies might be updated on the paper, but how do you bring that together? You know, how do you make sure that you are maximising the new features that are coming into your Schoolbox instance and that can help support what you're doing as a school? So you might be progressive in your paper with your pedagogical plans, and you might have the tool set at your fingertips, but are you making sure that you're maximising it? Chris, have you got any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting just seeing the hands go up then. I think we would have had a quarter of the room. And what's really interesting about that is change is constant, and it's always going to be occurring, whether it's at department level, whether it's at curriculum level, whether it's at your team level, and teachers coming and going. But I think one of the things that when we work with schools and when we look at what our successful schools are doing, especially from an adoption rate, Schoolbox goes through 3 major releases a year. Now, within those 3 major releases, there is significant functionality that gets rolled out at different points. But what we see is that the adoption's probably 12, 18, in some cases 24, 48 months behind what's been rolled out by the time schools start to adopt. The schools that I see that are really successful in that space have a really clear plan, a working team that actually looks at every single release that comes out, and they go, right, this information needs to go to our wellbeing team, this information needs to go to our teaching and learning directors, this information needs to go to our IT team, and they really clearly, systematically work through what are the pieces of the puzzle that we need to think about, what are the pieces of the puzzle that we need to address. So the context of that working party, and we, as educators, we're time poor. There's always a complaint about time, but I suppose it's the time for the most important pieces and what's really vital. And I think when you think of Schoolbox as a product, I don't look at it as just a piece of technology. I actually look at it as part of the school as a whole. When you think about communication, when you think about teaching and learning practices, when you think about student communication and student engagement, it's all interconnected, and what we do in the physical classroom should be replicated in our virtual classroom to build that consistency. And I think having that working party to really analyse, identify timelines, think about vision, think about purpose is where we're trying to encourage schools to go, so that you can get the longevity and the success of the product as a whole, or any product. And it's not just Schoolbox here. We talked to lots of people around other products that they use within the school. We had a conversation with a school recently, and they identified 96 products that they've got in their EdStack. So we talked about that. Well, what are they for? I know when we went through COVID, I was leading a school in Hong Kong, and I can think off the top of my head of 6 products we adopted right there and then because we needed to at the time. When I look back on that now, some of those products are still there. Are they still relevant? Is it still purposeful? Is it still meeting the need of the school where we are now? In a lot of cases it's not, but unless we're having that opportunity to have those discussions on a regular basis, the review and the reflection is really hard.
I wanted to just build on that. So the only certainty is changes. Like, change is happening all the time. Who'd have seen the AI curveball that came out, Edison 23? So agile leadership, super, super, super important. For example, we have actually enabled the AI functionality in Schoolbox. We did that at the start of term 3. Taking regular temperature checks of your staff is super important. It would have been so easy for me to be totally enthusiastic and share that out with our staff and to say, look, you can do this. Did they need that at that time and space when they were feeling a little overwhelmed and they needed to get their term 3 rubrics up and running? Probably not. So we've sat on that and we've actually drip fed it to some key people, to our teacher champions. So that idea of agile leadership is really important because Schoolbox actually has so much that you can do. Having the timeline is great, and also being able to negotiate on what feels right for your staff and when is also important.
That's contextual. So as I said, we sit in the room today, and it is contextual on what you want to achieve. I'm looking at Dave down here, a school that's got 3 campuses, 3 big campuses, compared to a school that's got 500 students and operate in a very different way. You need to think about any technology, any digital platform you're using contextually about what do we want to achieve as a school and how we're going to get there. And as I said, it gets harder and harder the bigger the school gets from a consistency perspective, but it's really important to make sure that that context is sitting at the heart of those decisions.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is that as a founding principle, one of the hardest reflections I had was sitting on my hands and not trying to do everything all in the first year. Our target was to open with 370 children, and we opened with 550. That's now grown to 850. That growth during a period of opening meant that we did open slightly understaffed in certain areas, so I had to be really careful with what I asked of staff. And I think a little bit like if you're delivering an inquiry math lesson, I've always said, create the thirst in the kids, create a problem that they need to solve, and then give them the math, and it's like a coming to the light moment. We've done that a little bit with Schoolbox, where we've waited until there's been those moments where someone's come and said, I really need to know how to do this, and it's like, okay, now we're ready to show you this part then of Schoolbox. And that's happened just this year as our secondary school's kicked in. We've got someone that's really pastorally minded, and they're looking at our house system. So our house system, if you have house systems, I don't know if that's a thing in Australia, but our house system is literally called D, B, S and J. They don't have names, we don't even have colours associated to them, anything. We just knew that eventually we would need a house system. We knew that in Schoolbox there's a little bit of something that can support with that. We knew that there's the pastoral system. No one was ready for it. And if I'd have tried to produce that in year one, when people were still getting to grips with how they open the scan doors to get in here and where the kids go for break and how they get fed, we'd have just drowned people. So we waited for that thirst to build, and then we satisfy it by introducing something new in the system. So we are going to be 24 months behind some of the releases. So it's like you said, contextual, and you have to make it work for you in your school.
I love that there's been a lot of mention here of staff and just considering what that change looks like for them. So it's the perfect segue into our next question. So we have already touched a bit on what it looks like for staff and how to support them. So thinking about that bell curve of adoption, you know, if you're rolling out tech change, there's always going to be that bell curve. There's going to be the people who are raring and ready to go and want to sort of jump forward and be sort of at the helm. And then you're going to have people who are maybe intimidated, particularly in environments where perhaps you've had staff there for a really long time and there's a lot of change happening. So how do you support that? Like, how do you commit as a school to your staff upskilling, but then also tackle people who are at different stages of that adoption?
We're really lucky that we have coaches, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that there's probably lots of schools in here that don't have coaches. We tackle it on a few different levels. So we have our coaching that you can book in one-to-one or book the coaches to come to the department meetings. We have whole school sessions where it's really collaborative and it's almost inquiry based. We'll sit there and with our data dashboards. It's a bit of an introduction, but there's also some time to play in the system. There's also, we create the instance, the professional development modules in Schoolbox. For us, we preferred to have it in our instance, so we made short videos that we then housed in our instance where people, and you'd release the video, then it was very specific with the workflow through the system to our instance, and regular communication. And I suppose just giving people permission that you're not going to know it all at once, that it's okay to say, I need help, or it's hard. And I often say, I literally am a whisker ahead. It's let's learn together, let's be open-minded, and let's place the purpose, and the reason why we're doing this is the students, so just let's not forget that. But it's challenging because every time you bring a new feature, you have to make sure that they've got the support, and so that's about checking your timelines are reasonable and within their capacity, because they are at the coalface with students all day. Coming to a meeting after school and learning a new feature or function can be challenging, so making sure that there's documentation, user docs, and I mean, that's the main ways we've been managing it.
I think from my perspective, thinking when we were back in a school day, you only get so many hours with your teachers to be able to do professional learning and support them and engage them in conversation. And I think one of the things that was really clear to us was around whether it was digital technology, whether it was a new reading program, whether it was a new maths program, what's the purpose of why we're doing training? What are we trying to get out of it? What's the end outcome? And that always come to the forefront. So we made a really conscious decision with all our digital technology that if it was important enough for us to use across the school, we wanted to make sure that at least once a term, we had a session booked in to be able to talk about, reflect, discuss, challenge each other on how we're using the technology. In this case, it was seesaw, which is a dirty word for us at the moment, but it was seesaw, and we continually reflected on it, and we made sure that it was once a term we had a conversation. Was it working for us? Was it meeting our needs? Did our parents get out of it what they wanted to get out of it? So it was a regular reflection. And then I put my Schoolbox hat on and go, well, our teams have developed an amazing resource in the online learning platform. And it is really an amazing resource from a on-demand opportunity for teachers to engage when they want to engage, or support staff or anybody in your school to engage with it. However, it's only as good as it's used within the school, or the priority it's put on within the school. And I think what's really important is contextually knowing what, I keep coming to this contextually, but contextually knowing what your staff need and at what point in time. And I think picking up on the piece that Lee talked about, with such a big product, enabling them to engage in those pieces along the way will generate conversation and generate enthusiasm and generate excitement in different points, or it might go the other way as well, and that's okay as well, as long as the reflection's there. But I think it's making use of the tools that are available at the time that they're needed is probably the biggest conversation.
Can I just add two more things? You just got me thinking. The sharing of practice. So make sure, like, whether it's learning moments or it's share what's happening in Schoolbox, get the teachers to share with one another, and feedback. We shouldn't be frightened of feedback, and so we are constantly getting feedback from our heads of department, our junior school leadership team. What's working well, what's not working well, whether it's, our kinder have had to move from seesaw to learning moments, trying to enable them to use the workflow quicker, but don't be frightened of feedback. Feedback's just telling us how to get better. So have those surveys or those opportunities to get feedback at meetings to say, how can we do this better? What more do you need?
That feeds back into your culture, doesn't it?
Ours is, again, at the moment, I don't want to say treading water, but we're not forging ahead with trying to move forward with Schoolbox. So it just comes back to our two commitments, 2 of our 4 commitments again. Our community matters to us. So anything you're putting on Schoolbox, think about the quality that's going out and that professional responsibility that you have to your colleagues. So if you are looking at exploring something and you're going to be doing a little bit more in Schoolbox, don't set everyone else to look bad, because they're not bad. It's just that you've gone a little bit further forward. So collaborate and communicate with the people, at least within your area. Because what we don't want to do is find that one teacher's really going to town with their learning moments and posting loads of really cool things, and the other ones are just sticking to what we've generally agreed is going out, because then our parents are going to say, well, I wish I was in Class A now, because Class A is doing so much more than B, C and D. So that's really been just those 2 commitments again, making sure that high quality is going out to our families, but you're being professionally responsible and empathetic to those around you, because what you can do may be different to what others can do, so collaborate and work with each other. And that's really what's come out of that then is people, and we've also said, like, you pretty much can't break Schoolbox, so just play around to your heart's content. And then that's brought us to a point where now we've actually, the head of primary now has a little bit more headspace to look at Schoolbox from that perspective, about moving it to the next iteration. And the evolutions then are coming out of where teachers have explored with things, the challenges that they've faced and where they want to go with it. So then they're going whole kind of section, they're going up a little bit rather than it just going little peaks and troughs.
I think the last thing I wanted to add just on that part is I'm very, very fortunate in my role that I get to travel to a lot of conferences and a lot of events, and I think what really resonated with me when I visited EdgeTech in Sydney not long ago was the amount of our current customers, people who might not be in the room today but are using Schoolbox, and they come up and they're there for a different reason, and I really want to do this, or my team wants to do that, but you can't do that in Schoolbox. I think I had this conversation with Aisha, who was one of these people who came up to me. But I think what was really evident was that this was around information. They could do the things that they wanted to do in their departments. They just didn't know that they could do it because of the people who held the reins or the knowledge, where the knowledge was being transferred. So I think knowledge is power with any digital platform you've got. As I said, what a small group of people see the potential of something, another group of people might see something totally different. And I think by giving the knowledge out and making sure that people are aware of what the product can do and to support them, and let them make their own decisions is really important. And then feedback, obviously, have your check-in opportunities to make sure they're aligned with everything you're doing. But giving people that power or the information to have the power to think about their context is really important.
Wonderful. I'm going to skip forward to the next one now. So I guess this is kind of the big question, isn't it? So measuring impact. And we're talking about pedagogical alignment and that sort of thing. So you've already referenced here not being afraid of feedback and having open dialogue with your staff and your community. So I guess that's something that feeds into the impact and measuring how effective your strategies are. Is there anything else that you can add there in terms of what you do to measure impact?
Well, with us, obviously, our main use of Schoolbox is that community communication piece. And across our group, we've got lots of schools, but we've got a premium international group. And across that group, we were the only school that didn't have communication as a negative element of feedback that came from our marketing team when they did focus groups with our parents. So I was really proud of that. I thought that was a really good demonstration of what Schoolbox can do. The other thing is that it doesn't come through in communications that our communication is poor. So we don't get lots of complaints about, I never know what's happening. We get a few parents come up and say, do you know what you can do on Toddle? You can have groups where you just click on that and your news is grouped. And then I say, pull your phone up, click there, and it does exactly the same thing. And that's usually satisfies that. But then if you're out and about around parents, and I'm out every morning in reception in one of our 2 receptions and going around parents and talking to them, asking those questions and saying, how do you find the use of Delili Schoolbox? It's almost always positive, and we get families that have come from some of our other schools that talk about our communication being better than what it's been in the past. And I think one of the biggest things is that, and it's a really obvious thing, I guess, for you guys now, but it's, I have an EYFS child and I don't hear about year 6 because I don't need to. Or I've got a year 6 child and I don't get all the news about EYFS that doesn't matter to me. And I think that, again, it's a very simple and probably a rudimentary part of what Schoolbox is when it comes to communication, but that's been a really big impact for us, and it's a good juxtaposition when you get families come from other schools where they're saying, finally, I only get this, or finally I get that. And one of my bugbears is reports and newsletters, because by the time they're published, they're out of date, and that was one of my biggest things, was that when I have a traffic issue around my school, I push a notice out straight away. So we're not having to wait until the end of the month, and in the newsletter I'm updating people about traffic, because by that point it's probably been solved. So I'm getting something out right in the moment to say this is what's happened. So that for me is probably where I measure the impact the most. It's in those qualitative moments rather than the quantitative facts and figures.
I think measuring impact for us at Schoolbox is really interesting. We've got a number of measures that we put in place for every school that we can look at from a data perspective, and one of the roles of one of the teams that I work with, the school engagement team, is to be able to get out and have conversations with schools and have executive sessions and present the data to them. So the data sets, for example, we'll look at any school and see, well, how are you using rubrics? How often are you using rubrics? What does rubrics look like in there? How many learning moments have you captured? What's your engagement rate for students, parents, teachers across your school? How often are they logging in? When are they logging in? What periods of time are they logging in? You may see how many spikes you get at reporting time and things like that. So data sets are great, but the story that goes with it and what happens with that data is even more valuable, and having the conversation around that. So if you're looking for ways to measure and you're looking for ways to look at the impact of the platform, I'd encourage you to reach out to your school engagement managers so that they can come and share some of that data with you, and that will continue to evolve, and hopefully we'll get that into portals and things for you guys to access along the way as well.
Just adding on to that, one thing that I do like to do is when a parent comes and says, communication's not good, like, I never know about anything, I don't do this. I love going in and saying, well, you've not logged in for 6 months. So how are you picking up the news? You or your wife hasn't logged in for 6 months. So that's always a nice one for me. I like using that data.
So I just wanted to share 2 quick things. One, we were brave enough to report out of Schoolbox last term, and it was a skinnier version than what the parents had had. And we'd been very transparent about that, because they hadn't had the functionality yet to do where the cohort is. We couldn't switch a couple of things off. So we sent out an assessment and reporting survey to parents and got feedback about what's important. Before we start building and moving forward, what do you want? Whether it is the learning moments, whether it is the reports, what would you want on the reports? Getting that feedback from our families was super, super important. The other bit that recently we've been, because we're only really not even 3 terms into using the system with everybody, where our junior school staff had come from Seesaw, and so there was a big learning curve, teaching the kids how to use learning moments, as well as them using class use and using the learning moments for the younger kids. And we had our learning moments PD with our teachers, and one of the things that they brought up was the class analytics. Like, when you go to your class page and you can see who's logged in. And a few of the teachers, because we all have them in our school, looked at that data point and said, well, why are we doing all this work? Why are we putting all this effort into making sure that we're putting learning moments and class news out? What is the point of that if our parents are not looking? And of course, that's feedback for us to say we need to build parent capacity and engagement. Getting them offline in schools or online in schools has been challenging at our school, like whether it's a Year 7 information evening or into our digital spaces. So we do need to do some thinking about that. But we were able to say to the teachers, what's your purpose of putting up a learning moment? It's an artefact of learning. It's a celebration for you and the child. You can look back at the end of the term when you're writing reports or rubrics and you've got evidence of learning. So let's not get caught up with the fact that maybe not all of our parents are jumping in and looking. Let's actually remember why we do that. We collect artefacts and evidence of learning to shift and improve our students' experience at school. So the metrics are ongoing, and also we would want to see growth, having our digital platforms aligned. We would want to see now in Tally School that we are getting our low academic performance and our high academic performance kids moving, and that they're not sitting down in that regression. So there's some of the metrics that we're using.
Wonderful, great insights, thank you. I'm conscious of time. I feel like I could sit here and continue to just ask questions and pick your brains. So thank you so much for sharing all of that information. I am just going to jump forward to my last slide. Just some key takeaways here for you up on the screen. I'm not going to read them out, but I think you can see that from the stories and what has been shared with us here today, that obviously these are our key elements here that can make that change really lasting and purposeful, and to align with your broader strategies at the school. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time for a Q&A today, but please do keep the conversation going. Keep talking amongst yourselves over the next 2 days. I really hope this has sparked some conversation starters for you. And also, as Chris mentioned, please do reach out to your school engagement manager if you do want some support around how you can sort of shift the way you're operating with your tools, if you're looking to better align with some of the strategies that you have in place. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel again. I appreciate you so much in being here and sharing with us.